Hey guys, so we're going to be able to read online, and I'll record myself once a week. We're going to read, and then that way you have your assignments, and then we'll just go from there. All right, I'm starting on page 1, and I will post a PDF so you can see that. My business hours will be 9:30 to 10:30 every morning. April 27th, 1992. Greetings from Fairbanks. This is the last you shall hear from me, Wayne. Arrived here 2 days ago. It was difficult to catch rides in the Yukon Territory, but I finally got here. Please return all mail I received to the sender. It might be a very long time before I return south. If this adventure proves fatal and you don't ever hear from me again, I want you to know you're a great man. I now walk into the wild, Alex. Because remember, he was going into Alaska by himself. Jim Gillian had driven 4 miles out of Fairbanks when he spotted the hitchhiker standing in the snow beside the road. Thumb raised high, shivering in the gray Alaska dawn, he didn't appear to be very old. 18, maybe 19 at most. A rifle protruded from the young man's backpack. He looked friendly enough. A hitchhiker with a Remington semi-automatic isn't the sort of thing that gives motorists pause in the 49th state. Gillian steered his truck onto the shoulder and told the kid to climb in. The hitchhiker swung his pack into the bed of the Ford and introduced himself as Alex. Alex, Gillian responded, fishing for a last name. Just Alex. The young man replied, pointedly rejecting the bait. 5 feet 7 or 8 with a wiry build, he claimed to be 24 years old and said he was from South Dakota. He explained that he wanted to ride as far as the edge of Denali National Park, where he intended to walk deep into the bush and live off the land for a few months. Gillian, a union electrician, was on his way to Anchorage, 240 miles beyond Denali on the George Parks Highway. He told Alex he'd drop him off wherever he wanted. Alex's backpack looked as though it had weighed only 25 or 30 pounds, which struck Gillian as an accomplished hunter and woodsman as an improbably light load for a stay of several months in the backcountry, especially so early in the spring. He wasn't carrying anywhere near as much food and gear as you'd expect a guy to be carrying for that kind of trip, Gillian recalls. The sun came up. As they rolled down the four-sided ridges above the Tanana River, Alex gazed across the expanse of windswept Mesquite stretching to the south. Gillian wondered whether he'd picked up one of those crockpots from the lower 48 who came north to live out ill-considered Jack London fantasies. People who think the unsullied enormity of the last frontier will patch all the holes of their lives. The bush is an unforgiving place. However, that cares nothing for hope or longing. People from outside, reports Gillian in a slow, sonorous drawl. They'll pick up a copy of Alaska Magazine, thumb through it, and get you thinking, hey, I'm going to get up on there, live off the land, go claim me a piece of the good life. But when they get here and actually head out into the bush, well, it isn't like that the magazines make it out to be. The rivers are big and fast. The mosquitoes eat you alive. Most places there aren't a lot of animals to hunt. Living in the bush isn't no picnic. It was a 2-hour drive from Fairbanks to the edge of Denali Park. The more they talked, the less Alex struck Gillian as a nutcase. He was congenial and seemed well educated. He peppered Gillian with thoughtful questions about the kind of small game that live in the country, the kinds of berries he could eat, that kind of thing. Still, Gillian was concerned. Alex admitted that the only food in his pack was a 10-pound bag of rice. His gear seemed exceedingly minimal for the harsh conditions of the interior, which in April still lay buried under the winter snowpack. Alex's cheap leather hiking boots were neither waterproof nor well insulated. His rifle was only .22 caliber, a bore too small to rely on if he expected to kill large animals, like moose and caribou, which he would have to eat if he hoped to remain very long in the country. He had no axe, no bug dope, no snowshoes, no compass. The only navigational aid in his possession was a tattered state road map he'd scrounged at a gas station. 100 miles out of Fairbanks, the highway begins to climb into the foothills of the Alaska Range. Alex put out his crude map and pointed to a dashed red line that intersected the road near the coal mining town of Healy. It represented a route called the Stampede Trail. Seldom traveled, it isn't even marked on most of road maps of Alaska. On Alex's map, nevertheless, the broken line meandered, which means wandered, west from the park's highway for 40 miles or so before petering out in the middle of the trackless wilderness north of Mount McKinley. This, Alex announced to Gillian, was where he intended to go. Gillian thought the hitchhiker's scheme was foolhardy and tried to reportedly to dissuade him. I said the hunting wasn't easy where he was going, that he could go for days without killing any game. When that didn't work, I tried to scare him with the bear stories. I told him that a .22 probably wouldn't do anything to a grizzly except make him mad. Alex didn't seem too worried. I'll climb a tree, is all he said, so I explained that trees don't grow real big in that part of the state, that a bear could knock down one of them skinny little black spruce without even trying, but he wouldn't give an inch. He had an answer for everything I threw at him. Galleon offered to drive Alex all the way to Anchorage, buy him some decent gear, and then drive him back to wherever he wanted to go. No thanks anyway, Alex replied. I'll be fine with what I've got. Galleon asked whether he had a hunting license. Hell no, Alex scoffed. How I feed myself is none of the government's business. F their stupid rules. When Galleon asked whether his parents or a friend knew what he was up to, whether his parents or a friend knew what he was up to, whether there was anyone who would sound the alarm if he got into trouble and he was overdue, Alex answered calmly that no, nobody knew of his plans, and that in fact he hadn't spoke to his family in nearly 2 years. I'm absolutely positive, he assured Galleon. I won't run into anything I can't deal with on my own. There was just no talking the guy out of it. Galleon remembered he was determined, real gung-ho. The word that comes to mind is excited. He couldn't wait to head out there and get started. 3 hours out of Fairbanks, Galleon turned off the highway and steered his beat-up 4x4 down a snow-packed side road. For the first few miles, the Stampede Trail was well graded and led past cabins scattered among weedy stands of spruce and aspen. Beyond the last of the log shacks, however, the road rapidly deteriorated. Washed out and overgrown with elders, it turned into a rough, unmaintained track. In summer, the road here would have been sketchy but passable. Now it was made unnavigable by foot and a half of mushy spring now. 10 miles from the highway, worried that he'd get stuck if he drove further, Galleon stopped his rig on the crest of a low rise. The icy summits of the highest mountain range in North America gleamed on the southwestern horizon. Alex insisted on giving Galleon his watch, his comb, and what he said was all his money. 85 cents in loose change. I don't want your money, Galleon protested, and I already have a watch. If you don't take it, I'm going to throw it away, Alex cheerfully retorted. I don't want to know what time it is. I don't want to know what day it is or where I am. None of that matters. Before Alex left the pickup, Galleon reached behind the seat, pulled out an old pair of rubber work boots, and persuaded the boy to take them. They were too big for him, Galleon recalls, but I said, wear 2 pairs of socks, and your feet ought to stay halfway warm and dry. How much do I owe you? Don't worry about it, Galleon answered. Then he gave the kid a slip of paper with his phone number on it, which Alex carefully tucked away into a nylon wallet. If you make it out alive, give me a call, and I'll tell you how to get the boots back to me. If you make it out... Galleon's wife had packed him 2 grilled cheese and tuna sandwiches and a bag of corn chips for lunch. He persuaded the young hitchhiker to accept the food as well. Alex pulled a camera from his backpack and asked Galleon to snap a picture of him shouldering his rifle at the trailhead. Then, smiling broadly, he disappeared down the snow-covered track. The date was Tuesday, April 28th, 1992. So he just got dropped off at the trail in Alaska, and it was April, and there was still snow. So think about that. Galleon turned the truck around, made his way back to the parks highway, and continued toward Anchorage. A few miles down the road, he came to the small community of Healy, where the Alaska State Troopers maintained a post. Galleon briefly considered stopping and telling the authorities about Alex, then thought better of it. I figured he'd be okay, he explains. I thought he'd probably get hungry pretty quick and just walk out to the highway. That's what any normal person would do. The Stampede Trail. On the northern margin of the Alaska Range, just before the hulking ramparts of Mount McKinley and its satellites surrendered to the low Continental Plain, a series of lesser ridges known as the Outer Range sprawls across the flats like a rumpled blanket on an unmade bed. Between the flinty crests of the 2 outermost escarpments of the Outer Range runs an east-west trough, maybe 5 miles across, carpeted in a boggy amalgam of mesquite, elder thickets, and veins of scrawny spruce, meandering through the tangled, rolling bottomland in the Stampede Trail. The route Chris McCandless followed into the wilderness. So Alex is the name he tells everybody, but his real name is Chris McCandless. The trail was blazed in the 1930s by a legendary Alaska miner named Earl Pilgrim. It led to antimony claims he'd staked on the Stampede Trail above the Clearwater Fork of the Tolkat River. In 1961, a Fairbanks company, Utah Construction, won a contract from the new state of Alaska, statehood having been granted just 2 years earlier, to upgrade the trail, building it into a road on which trucks could haul ore from the mine year-round to house construction workers. While the road was going in, Utah purchased 3 junked buses, outfitted each with bunks and a simple barrel stove, and skidded them into the wilderness behind a D9 Caterpillar. So formerly a guy, took buses out to the trail, and that's where he left the buses just fully bunked. You know I gotta have my coffee. That hasn't changed. The project was halted in 1963. Some 50 miles of road were eventually built, but no bridges were ever erected over the many rivers it transected, and the route was shortly rendered impassable by thawing permafrost and seasonal floods. UTAN hauled 2 of the buses back to the highway. The third bus was left about halfway out of the trail to serve as backcountry shelter for hunters and trappers. In the 3 decades since construction ended, much of the roadbed has been obliterated by washouts, brush, beaver ponds, and the bus is still there. I'm going to grab a pen. 1 second. There's some words I want you guys to know, and I gotta keep track of them. Obliterated is one of them. A vintage harvester from the 1940s, the derelict vehicle is located 25 miles west of Healy as the Raven flies, rusting incongruously into the fireweed beside the Stampede Trail, just beyond the boundary of Denali National Park. The engine is gone, several windows are cracked or missing altogether, and broken whiskey bottles litter the floor. The green and white paint is badly oxidized. Weathered lettering indicates that the old machine was once part of the Fairbanks City Transit System, Bus 142. These days, it isn't unusual for 6 or 7 months to pass without the bus seeing a human visitor, but in early September 1992, 6 people in 3 separate parties happened to visit the remote vehicle on the same afternoon. In 1980, Denali National Park was expanded to include the Cannonetia Hills and the northernmost cordillera of the Outer Range, but a parcel of low terrain within the new park acreage was omitted, a long arm of land known as the Wolf Townships, which encompasses the first half of the Stampede Trail. Because this 70 by 20 mile tract is surrounded on 3 sides by the protected acreage of National Park, it harbors more than its share of wolf, bear, caribou, moose, and other game, a local secret that jealously guarded by those hunters and trappers who are aware of the anomaly. As soon as moose season opens in the fall, a handful of hunters typically pay visits to the old bus, which sits beside the Suhana River at the westernmost end of the non-park tract within 2 miles of the park boundary. Ken Thompson, the owner of the Anchorage Auto Body Shop, Gordon Samuel, his employee, and their friend, Freddie Swanson, a construction worker, set out for the bus on September 6, 1992. Stalking moose, it isn't an easy place to reach. About 10 miles past the end of improved road, the Stampede Trail crosses the Tuckahoe River as a fast, icy stream whose waters are opaque with glacial till. The trail comes down to the riverbank, just upstream from a narrow gorge. Through with Tekalinka surges in the boil of white water, the prospect of fording this latte-colored torrent discourages people from traveling any farther. Thompson, Samuel, and Swanson, however, are contumacious Alaskans with a special fondness of driving motor vehicles, where motor vehicles aren't really designed to be driven upon. Arriving at Telanacanica, They scouted the banks until they located a wide braided section with relatively shallow channels, and they steered headlong into the flood. So contumacious is another word. And remember, I have 3 kiddos at home, so if you see me shake my head yes, it means one of them may have wrote me a letter on a question on the note because I told them not to interrupt me. Alaskans with a special fondness of driving motor vehicles where motor vehicles aren't really designed to be driven. Upon arriving, I might have read this already, I'm sorry. Telekanika, they scouted the banks until they located a wide braided section with a relatively shallow channels, and then they steered headlong into the flood. I went first, Thompson said. The river was probably 75 feet and real swift. My rig is a jacked up 82 Dodge 4x4 with 3 8-inch rubber on it, and the water was up right to the hood. At one point, I didn't think I'd get across. Gordon has an 8,000-pound winch on the front of his rig. I had him follow right behind so he could pull me out if I went out of sight. Thompson made it to the far bank without incident followed. by Samuel and Swanson in their trucks, and the beds of the two pickups were lightweight, all-terrain vehicles, a three-wheeler and a four-wheeler. They parked the big rigs on a gravel bar, unloaded the ATVs, and continued toward the bus and smaller, more maneuverable machines. Maneuverable is going to be another one. A few hundred years beyond the river, the trail disappeared into a series of chest-deep beaver ponds. Undeterred, the three Alaskans dynamited the offending stick dams and drained the ponds. Then they motored onward, up a rocky creek bed and through dense elder thickets. It was late afternoon by the time they finally arrived at the bus. When they got there, according to Thompson, they found a guy and a girl from Anchorage standing 50 feet away looking kind of spooked. Neither of them had been in the bus, but they had been close enough to notice a real bad smell from inside. A makeshift signal flag, a red knitted leg, warmer of the sort worn by dancers, was knotted to the end of an elder branch by the vehicle's near exit. The door was ajar, and taped to it was a disquieting note, handwritten in neat black letters on a page torn from a novel by Nikolai Gogol. It read, SOS, which means help. I need your help. I'm injured, near death, and too weak to hike out of here. I'm alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall be returned this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless. August, ? The Anchorage couple had been upset by the implication of the note and the overpowering odor of decay to examine the bus's interior. So Samuel steeled himself to take a look. A peek through a window revealed a Remington rifle, a plastic box of shells, 8 or 9 paperback books, some torn jeans, cooking utensils, and an expensive backpack. In the very rear of the vehicle, on a jerry-built bunk, was a blue sleeping bag that appeared to have something or someone inside of it. Although it says Samuel, it was hard to be absolutely sure. I stood on a stump, Samuel continues, reaching through a back window and gave the bag a shake. There was definitely something in it, but whatever it was didn't weigh much. It wasn't until I walked around to the other side and saw a head sticking out that I knew for certain what it was. Chris McCandless had been dead for 2.5 weeks. Samuel, a man of strong opinion, decided the body should be evacuated right away. There wasn't room on his or Thompson's small machine to haul the dead person out. However, nor was there space on the Anchorage couple's ATV. A short while later, a sixth person appeared on the scene, a hunter from Healy named Butch Killian. Because Killian was driving an Argo, a large amphibious 8-wheeled ATV, Samuel suggested that Killian evacuate the remains, but Killian declined, insisting it was a task more properly left to the Alaska State Troopers. Killian, a coal miner whose moonlight was an emergency medical technician for the Healy Volunteer Fire Department, had a two-way radio on the Argo. When he couldn't raise anybody from where he was, he started driving back toward the highway, 5 miles down the trail. Just before dark, he managed to make contact with a radio operator at the Healy power plant. Dispatch, he reported. This is Butch. You better call the troopers. There's a man back in the bus by Suhana. Looks like he's been dead for a while. At 8:30 the next morning, a police helicopter touched noisily beside the bus in a blizzard of dust and swirling aspen leaves. The troopers made a cursory examination of the vehicle and its environs for sign of foul play and then departed. When they flew away, they took McCandless's remains, a camera with 5 rolls of exposed film, the SOS note, and a diary written across the last 2 pages of a field guide to edible plants that recorded the young man's final weeks in 113 terse enigmatic entries. Enigmatic's going to be another word. The body was taken to Anchorage, where an autopsy was performed to the Scientific Crime Detection Laboratory. The remains were so badly decomposed that it was impossible to determine exactly when McCandless had died. But the coroner could find no sign of massive internal injuries or broken bones. So coroner will be another one. Virtually no subcutaneous fat remained on the body, and the muscles had withered significantly. In the days or weeks prior to death, at the time of the autopsies, McCandless' remains weighed 67 pounds. Starvation was posited as the most probable cause of death. McCandless' signature had been penned at the bottom of the SOS note, and the photos, when developed, included many self-portraits, but because he had been carrying no identification, the authors didn't know who he was or where he was from or why he was there. So we'll stop there. That was about 15 pages, and you will have an assignment and just posted right after this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So far there will be 7 words to identify, and I will post the assignment. All right, stay healthy.